touching every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, healing every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, turning lives around. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, meeting every heart. I worship you. Yeah, I worship you. Letting you way make a miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 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 Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, Jesus, you are way maker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are way maker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 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 That is who you are.
Round of applause. Jim, thank you for leading us in that. And I just want to start off by saying uh, today is a little bit heavy because we're talking about sadness. And I think sadness, my feeling on sadness for a lot of my life has been that sadness sucks. And some of you, you may feel like that's a pretty strong way to say it, but um, I oftentimes have not liked sadness. I don't want to be sad. And so when that happens, find myself pushing back. And in 19, or not 19, boy, I'm jumping back too far, 2015, Pixar released a movie called Inside Out. And some of you have seen Inside Out. Just show me your hands if you've seen Inside Out, just real quick, just so I have a point of reference. Okay, I'm going to spoil the movie for you. So if you don't want to hear this part, don't listen. But in 2015, Pixar released a movie called Inside Out about an 11-year-old girl named Riley. And Riley was sad because she had moved from Minnesota to San Francisco. And so you get a picture inside of Riley's mind, and inside of her mind and inside of her heart, you get a picture of all the emotions she's feeling as she's moving from her beloved hometown of Minnesota to San Francisco. And inside of her, there's a war going on because Riley generally has been a very joyful person. She's been a very happy kid. And then she feels this deep sadness. And so her emotions are actually animated, and you see them at work inside of her. And you see the war between or in between sadness and joy as they're duking it out for control. And ultimately, as a result, they get pushed out of her consciousness. And the other three emotions that are highlighted emerge to the surface. And those are anger, disgust, and fear. And the thing that's so sad is you see her, she's moved to a new town, a new neighborhood, a bunch of new school, new friends, is Anger, disgust, and fear aren't taking her where she wants to go. And you find yourself wanting sadness and joy to come back, but they're gone. They've been kicked out because they could not work together. And as I reflect on the time I watched that movie, which was back in the summer of 2015, and where I was in my life, my father had passed away 8 months earlier, and I was really sad. I was sad about a lot of things going on internally. It kind of felt like a bomb had gone off. But one of the things I did that I don't fully recommend, even though sometimes it just is the best thing to do, is officiating your dad's funeral. And I was part of officiating my dad's funeral alongside my brother. And in that process, there were people who were coming needing comfort from me as a pastor. But what happened is I didn't really feel, as I just almost detached myself from sadness. And so I became numb. And then there was another factor, I think, about this movie that kind of sparked some things inside of me that I didn't like. And that was when I was 12 years old, my family moved to a new town where I had a new school in a new neighborhood with new friends. And I remember the internal war as I reflected in that moment of watching that movie. And I'm finding myself identifying with an 11-year-old girl, which isn't much fun. But I'm sitting there processing, I know how she feels. And at that point in my life, I'd pushed out sadness and joy. And I can tell you, my mom being on this call could tell you that anger, disgust, and fear were unfortunately a big part of the emotions that I let lead my life. And I wonder sometimes, like, hey, what kept me from being able to handle that well? Like, why did I allow the three emotions of anger, disgust, and fear to lead me? And I think the reason I did that is because I was afraid. I was fearful of losing control. I was also afraid of being vulnerable and weak. I mean, what 12-year-old boy wants to be weak? We want to know we have what it takes. We want to know that we're strong. And so I didn't like the idea of being vulnerable, and I already felt vulnerable and I already felt weak because I was 12 and I was thrown into a new neighborhood. And you know what 12-year-old boys are like when they meet each other. It's just a bunch of nonsense. And so it was very intimidating. It was very challenging. And I remember feeling very exposed and out of control and weak and vulnerable and fearful. And then here's the other thing. I was afraid if I allowed myself to really be sad, even at that time, as I pushed that away and joy at the same time, that I might get stuck in the sadness. And I share these things with you guys because we all know what it's like to be sad. I think we all know what it's like to feel like maybe if I allow myself to step into the sadness, I'm going to get stuck in it and I'm not going to be able to get out. And I think looking back at that time in my life, I detached, I became numb. I certainly wasn't living a whole self. I was living as a partial person, but that's my survival instinct. And I bring that up is because we all experience that. And so we get afraid that maybe we'll get stuck in it, or maybe we'll just stuff it down and pretend like it's not there. But we know that doesn't work because we are made as emotional beings. God designed us that way. And so one of the questions I had, and I wanted you to think about, is how do you not get stuck in the extremes of stuffing your sadness down or getting stuck in it? And let me elaborate on those things a little bit more. When we stuff it down and we numb ourselves and try to pretend like it's not there, we can really take on a mentality of, I'm going to be self-sufficient. I'm going to pull myself up by my own bootstraps. And so it becomes this prideful thing that can seem noble on the surface, but it's really not. It's self-sabotage. Or it's the other extreme if I stay stuck in it. And so instead of processing it while allowing joy to come back into our lives, we just try to we try to survive by staying stuck in it. And so we walk around like victims. We walk around and we're just like leaky faucets, drip, drip, drip all the time. And if you find that people are avoiding you, that could be you right now. I hope it's not, but we've all been to one of those extremes or the other, if not both, of being stuck in it or stuffing it down or being stuck in it. And so my whole thing is, what gets us there? What's the loss? It's the loss of friends. It's a loss of my comfort from being at the school I'd been at for a long time. It's a loss of being free to go and do what I want to do. It's a loss of being free to go to a restaurant and not have to wear a mask. It's the loss of having things like they used to be. And see, 11-year-old Riley, she was just a picture of me, but also you, of us. And so today, the reason why I bring all this up is we're talking about the Beatitudes. And these were 8 incredible statements that Jesus made in a sermon on a mountain, which we call the Sermon on the Mount. And he makes these 8 paradoxical statements that really seem kind of upside down, that do not seem naturally intuitive. And these statements can be extremely freeing, but sometimes hard to embrace. That's kind of how Jesus was. He would say something and it's like, wow, that's incredible, but it's really kind of hard to do. And so we're in the second of these 8 statements. And the one we're talking about today is in Matthew chapter 5, verse 4. And so if you want to look this up on your phone, it's Matthew 5, verse 4, or if you have a Bible and you want to open that up, you can feel free to do that. But this is what Jesus says. He says, blessed are those who mourn. And then he talks about the benefit. He said, for they will be comforted. That doesn't seem right, because I feel like oftentimes, like for me, when I've stepped into the sadness, it doesn't feel like the comfort's ever going to come. And so I started looking into, well, what does it mean to mourn? Mourn means to lament. It means to express sadness, not to stuff it, not to stay stuck in it, but to express sadness, even to wail. Have you ever cried to the point where you're wailing? It just hurts so deeply, and it's yet at the same time so therapeutic. That's what he's talking about, allowing yourself to get to the point where you say, you know what? I'm not going to stuff it. I'm not going to stay stuck in it. I'm not going to close the door on it. I'm going to open the door to it and invite sadness in. And so what does it mean to really be comforted? It means to be encouraged. It means to be strengthened. It means to be consoled. It means to be taught. And the beautiful thing about mourning is that it opens us up to a better tomorrow. It opens the door to joy and allowing us to function as whole people, not partial people leading with half our hearts. I love Jesus because he also lived out an example of this. And in John chapter 11, his follower John wrote about a story, a time he went to see a friend who had died and been dead for 3 days, and his name was Lazarus. And Lazarus had 2 sisters, Mary and Martha. And when Jesus arrived, they were so sad and they were so disturbed because they're like, Jesus, you knew about this and you didn't come, and our brother's sad and we're sad. And so Jesus, in a great show of empathy, entered into their sadness. And some of you who have read this account in John chapter 11 of Jesus and him going to actually raise Lazarus from the dead, know the shortest verse of the Bible is there. And if you want to memorize a verse of the Bible, this is a great one to memorize because it's easy. It's Jesus wept in John 11:35. But when we read those 2 words, we see something powerful. We see a God who is not above entering into our emotions. That he says, I'm not just leaving you by yourself. I'm there with you. I'm going to be in the pain with you. And even Paul, who wrote more books of the Bible than anyone else, he wrote about this empathy in Romans chapter 12, verse 15. He said, weep with those who weep. And when we allow sadness to actually express itself in our lives, when we allow that emotion to come up and we mourn, we invite other people in to weep with us as we weep. Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, said there's a time to cry and there's a time to grieve. And then going back to Matthew chapter 5, verse 4 in this Beatitude, the Message translation puts this out beautifully. And he writes this: you're blessed when you feel you've lost what is most dear to you. Now think about that for a second. You're blessed when you feel you've lost what's most dear to you. So there's an invitation to feel. And then he goes on to write this: only then can you be embraced by the one most dear to you. It's in expressing that sadness that we invite God in and we open the door to his healing power. And so a question I want to throw out to you guys, and one that I have to come back to, is am I stuffing my sadness? Are you stuffing your sadness? Or are you stuck in it, pulling yourself up by the bootstraps, or just leaking out wherever you go? And for some of you today, you need to open the door to sadness and invite it into your life. And let me give you 3 compelling reasons, in my opinion, on why you want to do this. One, when you invite sadness, you invite support. There are people who have been where you've been. They have experienced the emotions of what it's like, for instance, to move when you're in middle school and to be in a new neighborhood and a new school with new friends and mean people. I'm sitting next to one. We have the same story in that regard. Maybe it's why God just brought us together. We understand each other. It's just one of many ways. But when you invite sadness, you invite support. And as an extension of that, when you invite sadness in, you invite strength and comfort. You see, you weren't meant to do this alone. And so people are there to hold up your hands and hold up your arms and hold you up and help carry you through certain seasons of your life. And God has gifted and wired them to do that. But when you withhold that, when you stuff it in, or you just kind of leak it out like a victim and you don't fully express it, then they can't really step in and do what God designed them to do for you. See, sadness invites strength and comfort. And then the third observation I had as I was studying this passage is that inviting sadness invites salvation. It invites salvation and healing. It invites Jesus to come in and heal those places where we have been broken, where we have been hurt, and that he can take those places of hurt and he can take those places where people have dealt some of the hardest blows to us, and he can bring them to light, and he can use them for his purposes and his ways and his will to be accomplished. He can set us free. And what feels the most shameful oftentimes is oftentimes the thing that needs to be shared the most. Now, I'm not saying you need to go around everywhere and say, I'm sad about this with everybody you know, because that would be weird. And that would be more of that staying stuck in it type mentality. But we do need to be intentional about finding people that we can mourn with, that we can lament with, that we can express ourselves with, that we can sometimes get to the point of wailing and letting it all out. I thought about that this past week when Brooke and I were sitting with the family watching TV. And she had pulled up her phone and she was scrolling through her voicemail. And I don't know if you guys do this, but sometimes we keep voicemails from people that mean a lot to us. And so she stopped and she played this voicemail, and I hear the voice of her grandmother. If you guys don't know, Brooke's grandmother passed away in March. Her grandmother was awesome. And she was probably the person in this world that Brooke is most like. She understood Brooke, unlike a lot of people do. And so I watched Brooke listen to this voicemail, and then we kind of, as a family, simultaneously look over at her. And as she's doing right now, tears are streaming down her face as she was remembering both the joy that came with knowing her grandmother, but the sadness that she feels with the loss of her grandmother. And what it really showed me in that moment is that it's not a one-time deal. Like, I don't just check a box and say, I've been sad, I'm done. But she was able to simultaneously experience the joy of hearing her grandmother's voice and remembering the impact she had in her life, yet be sad and mourn and invite the comfort and understanding of us in the same moment. And that was a gift. I want to say thank you. And your story this past week, thank you for letting me share this, because you're now a gift to all these people who are with us worshiping this morning. Yeah. And so I want to ask you this, and we're about to land, and then we're going to sing a song called Another in the Fire, talking about God's presence with us. What is holding you back from opening the door to sadness, from inviting sadness in, and ultimately joy, and ultimately the support from others, the strength from others, the comfort from others, and the salvation and healing of Jesus? What's holding you back? That challenge to you is open the door to sadness and let God set you free to be everything you're made to be and become. So I'm going to pray for us. Jim, I'm going to hand it to you, and then we'll worship together. God, we thank you so much that you are working when we don't see it. And we thank you that when things are hard, when we feel the fire, when we feel the pain of life, that God, you are there. You are right next to us. And I pray that as we all have experienced different blows in life and different losses in life, that you would help us not to harden our hearts, that you would help us to open our hands to you, that we would open the door to your involvement and to the involvement of others in our sadness, validating that emotion and inviting joy to come along with it, so that we could be the fullest version of who you made us to be. So we thank you that today you're both with us and for us. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Jim?
There's a grace when the heart is under fire. Another way when the walls are closing in. And when I look at the space between where I used to be and this reckoning, I know I will never be alone. There was another in the fire, standing next to me. that's where you'll be. Look how the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. Look how the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. Look how the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. Look how the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be.
Thank you, Jim. Someone commented, actually Tom Norris commented that he could listen to you sing all day. And I think I agree with him. There are a couple high notes that you hit today that I couldn't go with you, but I certainly could worship in the process. So I'm thankful for your gift, and thankful that you offer it to us and to the Lord in that way. Just such a great reminder that we're not alone in whatever we deal with. So with that said, I just want to challenge you again to think about how are you going to open the door to sadness in your life. And I'm going to hand it over to my lovely sidekick, Brooke, and she's going to let you know what we're doing for small group. And Brooke, before you tell everybody where they're going, would you just speak to the benefit of that and maybe what we've experienced when we see the interaction on these calls on Sunday, just so people can understand the value, not only that they get added to them, but that you add to other people. So
I feel like you just kind of spoke to the value of small group, which it's true. I feel like what happens here is really, really great. But I think for those of us who have participated in the small group part of our Sunday morning calls, would say that what happens in those times is of equal or maybe even greater value, just because you're able to talk about what we've just talked about here and really talk about it in a way that I feel like it sticks to where it becomes something that we think about more often throughout the week rather than just right here in this moment, because it's so easy to hear it and walk away. And those small group times, I feel like, make it a little bit harder to just walk away and not let it sink in. And I think that's a good thing. So with that said, we are going to start another call. I think you said what time? 11:40. So that's another like 5 minutes.
Yeah, I'll give you 5 minutes to take a bathroom break and get more coffee. But yeah, 11:40.
Okay, so I think I have everybody. There are a lot of people today, which is super exciting. So I think I have everybody. If for some reason I don't say your name, please send me a text, and please don't have your feelings hurt, because I had to flip between two screens and it's weird and it's hard to make sure I have everybody. So I tried really hard. So I apologize in advance, but you'll get an email from one of the three of us in Brian's group today. Teresa, Jim, Richard and Carolyn, Brian and Amanda, Amy and Brad, Tanya, Don and Donna, Sarah, Mia and May, Reagan and Colin, with Charles and Vanessa, Diane, Pat and Julie, Becca and Scott, Nate and Laurie, Mike and Suzanne, Heather and Derek, Will and Matt. And then with me, Norman, Bridget, Anthony and Christina, John and Brittany, Ryan, Sam and Jenny, Matt and Josie, Jason, Philip, Tom, Joe and Amy. And I see a bunch of people in cars and driving and all of that. So hopefully you guys can hop in with us in the midst of baseball and traveling and everything else. So I think that's it.
Yeah.
Did I leave something out?
No, you did great.
Okay.
All right. So we'll see you guys in about 5 minutes. Thank you so much for being with us. We'll see you then.